March 14, 1987. Roy Fielding was 3 hours into demolition work on an old Cerro Gordo County, Iowa farmstead when his backhoe blade struck iron. Not soil pipes, not drainage tile. Something massive, something green. He cleared the topsoil carefully. His crew went quiet. And inside a sealed earthen chamber, John Deere Model D tractors sat nose forward in a long, dark row, hoods still pale with original paint, engines cold for decades. 52-cylinder cast-iron machines, spanning 25 years of production. They were placed underground with deliberate care and left untouched for nearly 40 years. Someone had done this on purpose. No one had ever said a word. So if you want to see how 50 John Deere Model Ds ended up sealed beneath an Iowa field, and why the man who put them there never told a living soul, here's what I ask. See that subscribe button? It's our exchange. Your way of saying this reached you. Hit subscribe if this resonated, drop a like if it moved you, and tell us in the comments what you know about hidden tractor collections. It helps us share more stories like this. Back to Earl Harmon and his 50 Model Ds. But to understand how this happened, we have to go back. Earl James Harmon was born in 1894 on a rented corn farm outside Mason City, Iowa. He learned to plow behind horses before he ever turned a key. The John Deere Model D arrived commercially in March 1923, when Earl was 28 years old. He attended a county field demonstration in May of that year. He drove one for 20 minutes. He never wanted a horse again. The Model D ran on kerosene, cheaper than gasoline and available at every Iowa implement dealer. Its two-cylinder, a 465 cubic inch engine delivered 15 horsepower at the drawbar. For a man who had plowed with draft animals, that number meant everything. Earl saved for 3 years. In the spring of 1926, he paid $1,000 for his first Model D, serial number 32114, built in Waterloo the previous fall. He drove it home on steel wheels in 4 hours. Through the late 1920s, Earl expanded steadily. By 1929, he owned 2 Model Ds and farmed 320 acres in Cerro Gordo County. Then October came. The markets collapsed, and in what he had built began pulling apart at the seams. The Depression hit Iowa farmland with compounding force. Corn prices fell to 8 cents a bushel. Banks called in loans. Neighbors who had farmed for 30 years lost their property at courthouse auctions in a single morning. Earl held on. But he watched what happened to machinery prices. Model Ds that cost $1,000 new were selling at distressed auctions for $60, sometimes $40. He recognized what that meant. He started buying. He was not collecting for sentiment. Earl believed the Depression would end, and that land would recover, and that whoever held working machinery through the collapse would hold a decisive advantage on the other side. He was accumulating capital. By 1935, he owned 11 Model Ds. By 1937, 19. He stored them in barns under lean-tos. Behind windbreaks. Space ran short. The county noticed. And then came a different kind of pressure entirely. The wartime scrap drives of 1942 put real risk on any man who held large iron stocks. Federal agents moved county to county. Cast iron and steel were national priorities. Earl considered his options. He made a decision. He would not surrender his machines. Not to a scrap drive, not to government pressure, not to the expectations of neighbors who saw idle equipment as waste. He had 31 Model Ds by that winter. He began digging. He hired 2 men, his cousin Dale Harmon and a farmhand named Verle Ostrowski, telling them only that drainage work was needed on the north field. The excavation began in late October 1942. They cut 3 chambers into the black Iowa subsoil, each 12 feet wide, 8 feet deep, and 60 feet long. The walls were reinforced with salvaged oak planking. Floors were packed gravel for drainage. Earl inspected every joint. Before each tractor entered the ground, Earl drained and sealed the fuel system, packed the cylinder bores with grease, and wrapped exposed iron in waxed canvas. He worked alone on each machine. He said nothing about why. The first machines went underground in November 1942. Each tractor was lowered on a homemade crane mounted to Earl's heaviest wagon. He covered them with canvas tarps, then 6 inches of compacted earth, and walked away without looking back. 19 tractors in the first winter. By spring of 1943, 7 more had been added. Purchased at a foreclosure sale in Hancock County. Earl paid in cash. He asked no one's opinion. Dale and Verl asked no questions. The Model D had been manufactured entirely at John Deere's Waterloo, Iowa factory since 1923. By 1943, approximately 130,000 had been built. Earl's growing collection represented a narrow and irreplaceable slice, machines from every significant production era. He had early unstyled Ds from the 1920s, still on their original steel wheels. He had mid-production machines with the enlarged 501 cubic inch engine introduced in 1927. He had styled Ds with the Henry Dreyfuss bodywork debuted in 1939. The Dreyfuss styling gave the Model D a swept hood and a distinctive vertical grille. And Earl had acquired 3 styled examples at an estate sale in Worth County in 1940. Machines barely 4 years old when they went underground. Through 1943 and 1944, Earl kept acquiring. Wartime pressure drove prices down further. Farmers sold machines they could no longer fuel. Earl paid fair amounts quietly and moved tractors to his property after dark. Nobody asked questions. By the end of 1944, 40 tractors lay underground on Earl's north field. The chambers had been extended twice. The grass had grown back across the sealed entrances. From the road, nothing looked disturbed. Verla Ostrovsky left for military service in early 1943 and never returned to the farm. Dale Harmon remained. He was the only living person besides Earl who knew what lay beneath that field, and he kept that knowledge close. Earl farmed normally through the war years. His above-ground Model Ds, 8 of them, worked his corn and soy cycles without interruption. The buried machines waited in their oak plank chambers, sealed from weather, time, and anyone's attention. In 1947, as Earl added 8 more, 4 purchased from a retiring farmer in Floyd County, and 4 at a sealed bid surplus sale in Waterloo, the very city where every Model D ever built had been built. That brought the count to 48. So Earl needed 2 specific machines. He was filling gaps in a collection that now spanned 24 years of continuous production from a single Waterloo factory. He was particular about production years. The final 2 arrived in the fall of 1948. A 1923 Spoker D, one of only 5,846 ever built with a spoke pattern flywheel, and a 1948 machine freshly traded in at a Floyd County implement dealer. Earl did not celebrate. He descended alone into the 3rd chamber with a kerosene lantern, but confirmed the arrangement of all 50 machines and sealed the entrance himself. He was 54 years old. The work was finished. John Deere's Model D production ended officially on July 3, 1953. The last machine off the Waterloo line carried serial number 191670. Earl heard the news by radio that evening. He said nothing. He already had his 50. He continued farming until 1961, when a broken hip ended his ability to operate equipment. That autumn, he sold his remaining above-ground implements at public auction. The north field was not mentioned. The chambers were not opened. Earl Harmon died in January 1969, age 74. His estate passed to his nephew, Gerald Harmon of Ames, Iowa. Gerald had visited the farm dozens of times over the years. He thought he knew every acre of it. Gerald sold the farmstead in 1971, and the new owners, a grain farming operation, tiled and managed the fields for 15 years without disturbing the north sector. It sat slightly elevated, drained well, and showed no crop problems. And it was a routine demolition contract, clearing the old farmhouse footprint, that brought Roy Fielding's backhoe to the north field in March 1987. He was 40 minutes into the dig when the first tractor appeared below his bucket. The recovery took 11 days. Each tractor was lifted with a crane from a Mason City rental yard. Soil archaeologists from Iowa State University arrived on the third day. National Agricultural Press had reporters on site by the fifth. What they found was remarkable not only for scale, but for condition. Earl's preparation had been precise. Grease-packed cylinder bores had held. Waxed canvas had slowed oxidation. 23 of the 50 tractors started on a fresh fuel charge. The remaining 27 needed mechanical attention. Seized clutch assemblies, corroded fuel lines, cracked magneto housings. Nothing catastrophic, and nothing that careful hands could not address. The cast iron engine blocks had done what cast iron does. They had waited. 3 tractors were immediately identified as significant. A 1923 Spoker D with its rare spoke flywheel, and 2 1926 nickel hole Ds, early production variants that most collectors had never seen together in the same place. The 1923 Spoker D alone, in restorable condition, was valued by agricultural historians at more than $100,000. Earl Harmon had preserved, without knowing its eventual worth, one of the rarest surviving first-year Model D examples in Iowa. Iowa State University's Department of Agricultural History cataloged the full collection over 18 months. Their report, published in 1989, that described the chambers as the most intact, single-owner Model D collection ever documented. 47 of 50 tractors fully restorable. Gerald Harmon gave interviews in 1988. He told reporters he had found a hand-drawn map in Earl's personal papers after the 1969 death, but had assumed it was a drainage diagram. He had never looked at it twice. He never said a word, Gerald told the Mason City Globe-Gazette. Not one word. We walked that north field 100 times. Earl had kept his chamber sealed for 26 years, in total and deliberate silence. Historians debated his reasons for years, and the wartime scrap drive pressure was documented and real. But 50 tractors exceeded any practical hedge against equipment scarcity. Something else drove the decision. Something closer to principle, or stubbornness, or grief. Earl Harmon had grown up plowing behind horses. He had saved 3 years to buy his first machine. He had watched neighbors lose everything while holding only debt. The Model D was not inventory to him. It was proof. Proof that a tenant farmer's son from Cerro Gordo County could build something that lasted. That a man who started with nothing could preserve 30 years of American agricultural history, quietly, completely, without asking permission from anyone. 31 of the recovered tractors were purchased by collectors and restoration specialists across the Midwest. 14 entered museum collections in Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. 5 remain in private hands. The 1923 Spoker D is held in a Mason City collection. Earl's North Field is soybean ground today. No marker identifies what sat beneath it for over 40 years. The pits were filled after the 1987 excavation, but the machines he sealed in darkness now run in daylight. Those 50 Model Ds still run across the Midwest, alive because one Iowa farmer refused to let the earth have them. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us preserve these machines and the histories behind them. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from.